Are you struggling with the Spanish accent? Most learners never get pronunciation right, but this method makes it very hard to fail. I'm Hamid, I'm 16 and fluent in 4 languages, and I got fluent in Spanish in 120 hours of studying, and now I get people fluent fast.
Podré para mejorar mi español cuando no tengo mucho tiempo libre para estudiar español.
In this video, I'll show you my straightforward approach to getting perfect Spanish pronunciation and actually sounding like a native even though you've never been to a Spanish-speaking country before. And so by the end of this video, you'll be able to sound more like a native rather than a gringo. And also, if you make it to the end, then I have a free gift waiting for you. So recently, I was on an app called Hello Talk, and it's basically this language exchange app where you can interact with natives online. And so I was on this call, and this one person said that they enjoy exercising, and then we asked them, okay, what do you like to do? And this person wasn't speaking Spanish, she was speaking English because she didn't really speak Spanish. And so there was a Spanish guy there, and I was always speaking Spanish with him. And it was like this online chat room, right? And she said she likes doing Pilates. And then the Spanish guy didn't really understand. And so the Spanish guy didn't really hear her. And then I said in Spanish, Pilates. And then he called me out and he said in like kind of broken English, like, bro, when you said Pilates, that sounded very native. Like you sounded exactly like a native. And so those are kind of comments that implementing this method has gotten me. And so the focal point of this method of getting the perfect accent in Spanish is specifically vowels, okay? So these are the vowels in Spanish, okay? Now, vowels are open mouth sounds. I'm not going to confuse you with that. Vowels are like what makes a word a word. So if we took that, the word word, okay? Every word has to have at least one vowel in order for it to be a word. Because otherwise, if you got rid of the vowel, if you got rid of the O, we got word, right? That's not really a word anymore. Okay, so technically it's this open mouth sound where you open your mouth, okay? And so I like to think of vowels as the skeleton of Spanish words. And so the better frame that you have, the better bones or skeleton, the more native your Spanish is going to sound, because it's like the fundamental base of the sentence is stronger. And so getting vowels right in Spanish is like the #1 tip. I'm going to talk about other tips as well, but it's like an 80-20 sort of split, right? 80% comes from vowels, 20% comes from slang words and accent changes and stuff like that. But I'm telling you, 80%, if not even like, honestly, like 90% of the juice that's to squeeze from the accent orange is vowels. Vowels is a cheat code. So let's go through them together. So in English, we pronounce A like A. In Spanish, it's ah. Now, it's not necessarily short, but it is one consistent frequency. And I'm going to get into this when we reach the last vowel, okay? So, try saying that right now. The next one is not E, but The next one is I, which is in Spanish is I. And that's kind of pronounced like the E in English. Then we have U, which is pronounced U. And then we have the last one, which is O, which is pronounced O. Now, here's the thing. Some people like to imagine that the Spanish vowels are short. They're not necessarily short, right? Like, for example, O can be said O. It's still the correct vowel. What people really mean there is that it's a consistent frequency, or it's a consistent sound, or frequency if you want to use a complicated word. So in English, we say O. We have this like woo sound at the end. We had this like scoop at the end where we say woo, right? That's a U. I know damn, that's terrible. Whatever, you get it. U. In Spanish, it's just this O. Okay, so it's not O, it's O, right? O, and it's not O, it's O, right? Or A, okay? It's not A, it's ah, okay? Or I, U, right? And so going through it all together, it's I, U, O. Okay, some quick tips. You can try acting like a monkey where they go ooh, That's kind of goofy, but it does help if you struggle with vowels. Another tip is imagining them as laughs and then getting rid of the H's. So, ha, 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 get rid of the H. Ah. You can think he, he, get rid of the H. You got eh. Same with I, he, hu, ho, ho. Okay? And so in the Pilates example, we have 3 vowels here. We have I, e. Now, here's where the sauce comes in. Okay? I, e. I, The reason why he said that sounded really native is because I got the Pilates, I. And also the accent at the end, right? I didn't say Pilates, I said Pilates. But either way, you can hear how Spanish that sounds, right? It's not Pilates, it's Pilates. Right? You might have heard this popular quote, which goes something like this. Give a man a fish, you fed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you fed him for a lifetime. So I actually want to give you a tangible framework for understanding this difference between just Spanish versus the real Spanish that we hear. And this will be and don't worry, it'll only take a quick minute. So I want you to imagine how Spaniards actually speak. Firstly, do they say hola, yo hablo español, or do they say hola, hablo español? And that difference, like the difference between what is said right there, it matters so much, okay? And the reality is, vowels is most of it, right? But even let's say I, understood that those H's are silent, which most people know. Even if we did that, hola, yo hablo español, still isn't there. Now I can over-exaggerate the vowels and get something close like hola, hablo español. And that still sounds pretty good, but real Spanish, like real world Spanish, you probably notice is even more different than that. And so the difference is, if we take these strings of words, firstly, let's pronounce them with correct vowels and let's see what that gets us. So, aquí estoy, escúchame, es que hay muchos problemas. Okay, so we pronounce them correctly with correct vowels. What you'll notice is real natives won't even say it like that. Real natives will say, aquí estoy, escúchame, es que hay muchos problemas. Right? If we had ¿qué estás haciendo? And no te entiendo. A native might say, ¿qué está haciendo? And so really the next tip I can give you here is to sort of understand this translation, is to understand that along with vowels, which is the focal point of this video, I want you to focus on vowels. But once you've gotten vowels down, the next sort of most general thing that all natives do, or basically all natives, maybe not all natives, but most natives do this, is that they replace S's in Spanish with H sounds. All right, but they only do this in cases where it makes sense, okay? And so if we had a word like hablas, okay, a native might say habla. Or for example, Spanish. The word for Spanish is español. A native might actually say español. And so this tip, I guarantee you, it's not that hard to implement, okay? And you don't have to do it every single time, okay? And there are cases where you shouldn't do it. But if you can just implement this tip here and there in your Spanish, it will drastically improve how natives perceive you, because this is something that natives do naturally. And so, first to get the vowels down, right? Don't say hablas español. Obviously, understand how to pronounce the Spanish letters. So don't say don't say hablas, say hablas, right? With obviously the correct vowels. And so, a good way to see if you actually know the vowels is to just isolate the vowels in Spanish. So the vowels are A, E, I, A, O. A, E, A, O. A, E, A, O. Now you can have the consonants. Hablas español. So you can see just that tip will make you 10 times, 20 times, 30 times more native. This next tip might give you a 2x increase, right? Or might add a bit more to that, where you, instead of saying hablas español, you say habla español. And a lot of times they might even get rid of this E as well. Like we saw here in this example, estoy became toy, for example. It can also become estoy. Escúchame became escúchame. It is almost egregious how much they do this. And if you want to know why this is, apparently it's because Spanish requires more vowels per sentence in order to get the same meaning or something. Or more, words per sentence to get the same meaning. So they have to compensate by speaking faster. And they do that by putting together words, but also just speaking faster in general, which is why a lot of people here natives speak very quickly. And so it's not about getting rid of the S, but rather replacing it with an H sound, okay? With like a, okay? So, ¿qué estás haciendo? Will become ¿qué estás haciendo? Okay? Another example would be más tarde. Instead of más, you'd say ma. Now, I know this might seem fake in the beginning, because when I started implementing an accent, I kind of felt like this imposter syndrome. But what's interesting about humans is that when you tell yourself a lie over and over again, it eventually becomes true in your own mind. It's actually what a lot of people do negatively, but we're using it positively by essentially just telling ourselves that that's how we speak Spanish. And you do that by confirming it by actually speaking like that in Spanish. So to implement this tip, firstly, get the vowels down. That's number one. Do not even think about this S replacement before you've gotten the vowels down. But once you have gotten the vowels down, I think this is the next highest leverage accent goal, okay? It is replacing the S's with H's. Now, obviously, a word like cosas, you can't really do that. You might be able to get away with cosa. The first time I really heard this in action was in escondes. I don't know where the tilde goes. I think it goes right there. Escondes, which means you hide, okay? The woman said esconde. She said, me esconde cosas. And as you can imagine how much harder it is to understand that if you've only been learning escondes and you've never heard of esconde. So this makes a big difference. And you could probably trust me that I'm not making this up because Spanish people do speak very quickly, okay? Like this right here, aquí estoy, that literally came from a piece of Spanish content that I was using when I was learning Spanish back in 2022. A girl basically met up with a guy. She's Argentinian. She said, acá estoy. She said, bueno, acá estoy. I'm here. And actually, this is another quick tip I've just noticed with natives. When there's an S and then a T sound, to get this HT sound, it sounds like t, t. So for example, hasta, you would say ata. So for example, if I say until now, you could say hasta ahora, aquí estamos. Okay, that's a small tip. That's what I heard when I had a trip to Sevilla in Spain. That's just another tip. So if you want to say like, where are you? You could say donde estás. And that's a bit over-exaggerated, but that's how you get that HT sound, right? It's okay, now one final tip that I can give you in terms of Spanish accent. So we have the vowels, we have speaking faster by dropping letters and combining words like we saw just now. We obviously know the letters and characters, so the H's are silent, the rolling R, the Ns, the J's are pronounced like H's, the G's are pronounced like J's or like H's as well. The final one in terms of accent is different countries, okay? Now, this doesn't really matter because you can sound native with everything before this, but if you want to get a specific region down, you kind of have to implement the specific regional slang words, but also accent. And so, for example, in Spain, kind of like a lisp. Think about like the word think, right? That th is how you pronounce C's and Z's in Spanish from Spain. And so for example, to do is hacer, they might say hacer. Or for example, beer is cerveza, they might say cerveza. Okay, so it's actually kind of hard. I was actually struggling there. Or for example, heart is corazón, they might say corazón. I personally prefer pronouncing the Y's and the double L's, so the Y sound, like a J. So I would say me llamo instead of me llamo. I could say, I kind of interchange between J and Y for the double L's and the Y's. And that's what I find Latin American Spanish does, but also some parts of Spain also does that. Like my Spanish teacher who was from Sevilla, she also did that sometimes. And so these specific parts of accent are much less important than firstly vowels, then it's dropping letters and speaking faster and you're dropping the S's, replacing them with H. Then it's these kind of niche sounds. And obviously, granted, step 0 is like knowing that the H is silent and stuff like that, right? And then finally, the last sort of step is using slang words, having Spanish tone and having that tone and accent from a specific Spanish speaking region. And that's when you get into like Argentinian and stuff like that. One last thing, if you are choosing a specific Spanish tone or accent, there might be also a bit of new grammar to learn, which is kind of annoying. And that's specifically only for 2 examples. Spanish from Spain and Spanish from Argentina. So Argentinian Spanish has vos for you, and they also use tú, but they mainly use vos. And Spain has vosotros, which is the you guys instead of ustedes, okay? So I personally recommend just Mexican, Colombian, Venezuelan, Peruvian, any one of those like Latin American dialects over anything else. Unless you really want to learn Spanish from Spain, it's not that much more effort, but I think it's just easier because you need to learn fewer things to get basically the same Spanish. So here's that free gift I was talking to you about. So if you check the link in the description, then you can join the Speedy Spanish Hub, which is a free community that I created with 24/7 calls that you can join and free courses that I've created to help obsessed Spanish learners start learning Spanish, okay? And it's completely free to join. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed and stay humble.